My name is Chloe, and I'm the youngest of 4 siblings. Growing up, I always felt like the odd one out. My brothers Alex, Ethan, and Ryan were much older, already caught up in college jobs and relationships by the time I was still figuring out how to braid my hair. My sister Olivia was the only one close enough in age to almost feel like a companion. But even she treated me more like a nuisance than a sibling. I idolized them. When you're the youngest, your older siblings seem like superheroes. I used to think Alex invented the concept of cool with his leather jackets and fast cars. Ethan was quieter, more thoughtful, but his artistic talents made him a bit of a legend in our family. Ryan was the joker, always making everyone laugh, even me, when he bothered to notice I was there, and Olivia. She was perfect, smart, popular, and effortlessly graceful. I wanted so badly to be a part of their world, but most of the time it felt like they were living on a different planet. The first time I truly felt the sting of being excluded was at Alex's wedding. I was 10, and to me, weddings were magical dresses, flowers, music. I couldn't wait to be a part of it. I asked my mom if I could wear one of her necklaces, and I still remember how her face softened as she stroked my hair. That moment of happiness shattered when she told me, "Honey, Alex and Julia are having a child-free wedding. You can't come." I didn't understand. I wasn't like other kids. I was his sister. My mom tried to comfort me, saying I'd understand when I was older. I didn't understand. I just sat in my room, tears soaking my pillow while the rest of the family got ready to celebrate without me. I heard laughter from downstairs, car doors slamming, and then silence. I sat there staring at the clock, trying to imagine what was happening without me. When Alex came back from his honeymoon, I thought he'd at least say something, maybe even apologize. He didn't. In fact, he didn't even mention the wedding around me. It was like it never happened. I kept waiting for him to acknowledge that it hurt, but he just treated me like I was a little kid who wouldn't understand. 2 years later, it was Ethan's turn. By then I was 12, more mature at least, I thought so. When Ethan and his fiancée announced their wedding, I convinced myself that this time would be different. I was older, quieter, and definitely more well-behaved. I made sure everyone knew how mature I was, always offering to help around the house, hoping they'd see me as more than just the baby. But when the invitation list came out, my name wasn't on it. "It's another adults-only event," Mom explained with that same forced smile. I didn't cry this time, but my heart still broke. The only thing worse than being treated like a child is being ignored entirely. I didn't beg. I didn't throw a tantrum. I just quietly went to my room and stayed there. When I heard everyone getting ready, I put my headphones on and drowned out the noise. I didn't want to hear about Ethan's special day, not when I was deliberately left out again. When Olivia got engaged 3 years later, I had a tiny spark of hope. She wasn't planning on a child-free wedding at first. I remember overhearing her telling our mom how she wanted everyone there, including the younger cousins. But then our aunts and uncles got involved, insisting that weddings were better without kids running wild. Eventually, Olivia gave in. The rule became no one under 16. I was 15. I went to Olivia, trying to keep my voice from trembling. "Can't I just be an exception? I'm your sister. I promise I'll be quiet." She looked at me expressionless. "Chloe, it wouldn't be fair. If I make an exception for you, I'll have to make one for everyone." Fair? That word twisted in my stomach. It wasn't fair. I wasn't just any kid. I was her sister. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just turned around and walked away, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. That night, I broke down in my room, feeling completely isolated. My parents grounded me for disrespecting Olivia. 6 months of being grounded for trying to fight for a place at my sister's wedding. I spent most of that time in silence, letting the resentment simmer. When Ryan got engaged a year later, I didn't even bother asking. I was 17 by then, and I'd learned not to hope. Of course, the wedding was child-free. I felt numb when I heard. I didn't cry or rage. I just accepted it, the way I'd learned to accept that my siblings didn't see me as part of their lives. The final blow was when I found out that my cousin Sarah, who had just turned 18, was invited. She was barely a year older than me, but apparently that was enough. I overheard my parents telling someone on the phone, 18 is the cutoff. I wanted to scream that I was practically the same age, but I didn't. I just texted Ryan, "Congrats. Hope it's a great day," and went back to pretending I didn't care. After that, I gave up trying. I stopped asking to be included. I stopped caring if they saw me or not. I was done being the little sister who got left behind. Years passed, and I eventually met Eric. He was the first person who made me feel seen, really seen. One night, as I told him the whole story, he just stared at me, stunned. Wait, they didn't invite you to any of their weddings, not even when you were almost an adult? I shrugged. Nope, that's seriously messed up, he said, shaking his head. You're their sister. How could they just not care? For the first time, someone validated how much it hurt. I didn't realize how badly I needed that. I'd spent so many years convincing myself that it didn't matter that being left out was normal. But it wasn't. When Eric proposed to me, I knew one thing for sure. My wedding was going to be different. I was done being the afterthought. I was done begging to be noticed. This time I was going to be surrounded by people who actually cared about me. And my siblings. They weren't getting an invite. When Eric and I started planning our wedding, I felt a strange mix of excitement and dread. On one hand, this was my chance to finally have the kind of day I'd dreamed about, a day where I wasn't just an afterthought. On the other hand, I knew that not inviting my siblings was going to unleash a storm I might not be ready for. But I was done letting their indifference dictate my choices. Eric and I kept the guest list tight. We wanted a small, intimate ceremony with people who genuinely cared about us. Not just those who felt obligated to show up. It felt good, almost freeing to draft a list without worrying about family politics. Our closest friends. A few supportive cousins and Eric's family made the cut. My siblings. Not even a consideration. The first sign of trouble came when my mom called me one afternoon, her voice dripping with forced cheer. I should have known something was up. She never called just to chat. Hey, Chloe, how are the wedding plans coming along? She asked, her tone unnaturally bright. Good, I replied cautiously, already sensing where this was going. Almost everything's set. There was a pause, just long enough for me to brace myself. So, your brothers and Olivia haven't gotten their invitations yet. Did you send them out already? I took a deep breath. I knew this conversation was coming, but that didn't make it any easier. Yeah, I sent them out. Another pause. I could almost hear her frowning on the other end. Well, they didn't get theirs. Maybe it got lost in the mail. I bit my lip, my heart pounding. This was it. The moment of truth. No, Mom. I didn't invite them. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Then came the explosion. What, Chloe? What are you talking about? You didn't invite your own brothers and sister to your wedding. What's wrong with you? I felt my chest tighten, but I forced myself to stay calm. They didn't invite me to their weddings. Mom, not a single one of them. I'm just returning the favor. That was different. She snapped, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. You were a kid. They didn't mean to hurt you. I let out a bitter laugh. Well, it hurt anyway, and I'm done pretending like it didn't. Her voice took on that guilt-tripping tone she'd perfected over the years. Chloe, you're being spiteful. Family is family. You don't just shut them out like this. What will people think? And there it was, the classic, what will people think? My mother's favorite line. She had always cared more about appearances than actual relationships. I felt a surge of anger, but I forced myself to stay composed. I don't care what people think, Mom. This is my wedding. I'm only inviting people who actually care about me. They didn't care enough to include me in their big days, so I don't see why they deserve to be at mine. She hung up on me. I wasn't surprised. That night, the family group chat blew up. It started with Olivia, of course. She'd always been the one to stir the pot while pretending to be the peacekeeper. Olivia. Hey, Chloe. Did something happen with the mail? We haven't gotten our invites yet. Then came Ethan, blunt as always. Ethan. What's going on? Why aren't we invited? I stared at my phone, my thumbs hovering over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to lay it all out to tell them exactly how much they'd hurt me over the years. But another part of me knew it wouldn't make a difference. They wouldn't get it. They never had. So I did something they never expected. I didn't respond. I just left the chat on read. Eric noticed I was quiet during dinner and gently touched my hand. Hey, what's going on? I showed him the messages, my jaw clenched so tightly I thought my teeth might crack. He read through them, then looked up at me, his eyes full of understanding. You don't owe them an explanation, Chloe. They made their choices. Yeah, I said, my voice quieter than I intended, but they're going to make me out to be the bad guy. I know it. Let them, he said firmly, squeezing my hand. You know the truth. That's all that matters. I felt a small flicker of peace at his words. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't fighting this battle alone. The next morning, my parents showed up at my apartment unannounced. I should have known they wouldn't let this go quietly. My mom stormed in the second I opened the door, her face flushed with anger. What are you thinking, Chloe? Not inviting your own siblings to your wedding? What kind of person does that? I crossed my arms, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom, I told you. They didn't invite me to their weddings, so I'm not inviting them to mine. It's as simple as that. My dad, who had been standing silently behind her, finally spoke up. His tone was cold the way it always got when he thought I was being unreasonable. You're being childish, Chloe. You're holding on to something that happened years ago. And that's when I snapped all the hurt. The years of feeling like an outsider in my own family came rushing to the surface. I was a child when they did it, Dad. I begged to be at their weddings and they all shut me out. Don't talk to me about being childish when I was the one left crying at home while you all played happy family. For a moment, they were both silent, staring at me like they didn't even recognize their own daughter. My mom's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't let it sway me. You can keep defending them if you want, I said, my voice trembling with barely contained anger. But I'm not changing my mind. If they cared about me, they would have shown it back then. They left furious and frustrated, their footsteps echoing down the hallway like the final chords of a bitter symphony. As the door clicked shut behind them, I leaned back against it, my heart racing. For the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of relief. I had finally stood up for myself. When Eric got home later, he found me sitting on the couch, still shaken but strangely at peace. He sat down beside me, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. I'm proud of you. You know, he whispered, pressing a kiss to my temple. And for the first time, I believed it. I expected things to cool down after that. I thought my parents might simmer in their anger for a while and then move on. After all, my family had a long history of brushing things under the rug and pretending everything was fine. But I had underestimated just how deep their sense of entitlement ran. It started small. Olivia, always the queen of passive aggression, couldn't resist posting a cryptic status on Facebook. Olivia family should be forever, but sometimes people forget what that word really means. I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. Eric, who was sitting beside me, glanced over when he heard my annoyed huff. I handed him my phone and he let out a low whistle. What is she, 14? He muttered, shaking his head. Basically, I replied, tossing my phone onto the couch. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that I didn't care what my siblings thought anymore, but it still stung. It was hard not to feel hurt when the sister I had looked up to my whole life was now throwing thinly veiled jabs at me for finally standing up for myself. The group chat I had left went silent for a few days, but then it started to heat up again. I hadn't muted it yet, mostly out of morbid curiosity, so when my phone buzzed, I made the mistake of glancing at the notification. Ethan. It's sad when family starts prioritizing petty grudges over real love. Ryan, I just don't understand. I thought we were better than this. Then, predictably, Alex jumped in with his signature older brother knows best tone. Alex. I never realized how much bitterness you've been holding on to, Chloe. It's really sad. You're ruining relationships over something that happened years ago. I stared at the screen, my blood boiling. They didn't get it. They still didn't get it. They had spent my entire life excluding me, treating me like a footnote in their stories. And now they had the audacity to act like I was the one tearing the family apart. For a moment, I felt the urge to respond, to lay it all out in brutal, unforgiving detail, to remind them of every birthday they ignored, every family dinner where I was the forgotten one. Every tear I shed alone in my room while they played happy families without me. But then I realized that it wouldn't matter. They had never listened before and they wouldn't start now. Instead, I did something they never saw coming. I left the group chat. That night, my mom called me. I knew she'd heard about the group chat incident because she jumped straight into yelling the second I answered. Chloe, what is wrong with you? Leaving the family chat. Ignoring your siblings. This isn't how family behaves. I took a deep breath, feeling my pulse spike. Hi, Mom. Don't start with that attitude, she snapped. Do you know what you've done? Your siblings are heartbroken. You're destroying this family. Heartbroken. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. They had ignored me. My entire childhood shut me out of their lives, and now they were heartbroken because I refused to keep playing the forgotten little sister. I'm destroying this family, I shot back. My voice trembling with the weight of years of pent-up hurt. I was 10 when Alex got married. Mom, 10, I begged to be there, and you all told me I didn't matter enough to be included. And it happened again and again. I begged to be at Olivia's wedding, and she told me no, because it wouldn't be fair to the other kids. I spent my teenage years crying alone in my room because my own family didn't think I was important enough to include. So don't tell me I'm destroying this family. That was years ago, she said dismissively, her voice wavering just slightly. You're an adult now, you should let it go. I felt a bitter laugh bubble up in my throat. Yeah, it was years ago. And I'm still living with the way it made me feel. You all decided I wasn't important enough back then, so why should you suddenly get a front row seat to my life now? She fell silent for a moment, and I could almost picture her sitting at the kitchen table twisting her wedding ring around her finger the way she always did when she felt cornered. "This isn't about the weddings, Chloe," she said finally, her tone shifting from anger to forced concern. "This is about you pushing everyone away. Family is all you'll have in the end." I took a deep breath, my chest tightening. "No, Mom. Family is supposed to care about you. They're supposed to love and support you. That's not what you've been to me. You made me feel like I didn't matter, and I'm done pretending that's okay." I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking. I dropped the phone onto the couch beside me, leaning back and closing my eyes as I tried to steady my breathing. Eric walked in a moment later, a worried look on his face. I heard you yelling, "Everything okay?" I managed a weak smile. "Just my mom trying to guilt-trip me into inviting the siblings to the wedding." He crossed the room in 2 long strides, pulling me into his arms. "Hey, you don't owe them anything. You deserve a day surrounded by people who actually love you." I buried my face in his chest, feeling the tension slowly drain from my body. "I know," I whispered, my voice muffled against his shirt, "but it still hurts." "I know it does," he murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. "But you're doing the right thing." I clung to him, letting his steady heartbeat calm my frayed nerves. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone. Like maybe I could finally break free from the shadow my family had cast over my life. Later that night, as we sat on the couch watching some mindless sitcom, Eric reached over and gently squeezed my hand. "You're stronger than you realize, you know." I looked over at him, his blue eyes full of quiet reassurance, and felt a small flicker of hope ignite in my chest. "Yeah," I whispered, squeezing his hand back. "Maybe I am." I thought the worst of it was over. I had made my decision, stood my ground, and even walked away from the family group chat without a second thought. I figured they would grumble among themselves for a while, then move on like they always did. But I underestimated just how deeply my family clung to their twisted sense of entitlement. A few days after the call with my mom, I got a message from my cousin Lauren. She had always been the kind of relative who thrived on drama, the one who always knew everyone's business before they did. I hadn't heard from her in months, so when her name popped up on my screen, I hesitated before opening it. Lauren. "Hey, just heard about the wedding situation. Your siblings are saying you're going through some kind of phase. They're telling everyone you're being dramatic and that you'll regret this." I rolled my eyes. Of course, they had already spun the narrative to paint me as the unstable one. I could practically hear Olivia sighing to our aunts over brunch, lamenting about her poor misguided little sister who was acting out for attention. I didn't bother replying. What was the point? I had made my decision, and I wasn't about to be guilt-tripped back into a family that had never truly made space for me. But the messages kept coming. My Aunt Maria, always the self-appointed family mediator, sent me a long text a few days later. "Aunt Maria, Chloe, I don't understand why you're doing this. Family is everything. Your siblings love you. This whole situation is breaking your mother's heart. Please reconsider before it's too late." I felt my jaw clench as I read her words. I loved how they all acted like I was the one breaking the family apart, as if my siblings hadn't spent years ignoring me, pushing me to the sidelines and treating me like an inconvenience. I didn't reply to that one either. Things escalated a week later when my parents showed up at my apartment again. I hadn't bothered to block them because deep down I still hoped they might finally listen, might finally see my side. But when I opened the door, I immediately knew I was wrong. My mom's eyes were red-rimmed like she had been crying, but her jaw was set in that familiar stubborn line that meant she had already decided I was the villain in this story. My dad stood behind her, his arms crossed over his chest, his face a mask of disappointment. "Chloe." My mom started, her voice wavering slightly. "We need to talk." I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "I'm listening." She took a deep breath, her eyes filling with fresh tears. "This has gone too far. You're ripping this family apart over something that happened years ago. Your siblings are devastated. Your father and I are heartbroken. Can't you see what you're doing?" I felt my heart tighten, the familiar sting of guilt trying to worm its way back into my chest, but I forced myself to stay strong. I had come too far to back down now. "I'm not the one ripping this family apart, Mom," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. They made it clear a long time ago that I didn't matter to them. I spent my entire childhood being left out, ignored, and forgotten. I begged to be included, and they shut me out over and over again. So don't stand there and act like this is all my fault. My dad's face hardened, the lines around his mouth deepening as he stepped forward. "You're being childish, Chloe. Family is forever. You don't just cut people off because of a few hurt feelings." I felt my anger flare hot and sharp. A few hurt feelings. You think this is about a few hurt feelings? I spent years watching my siblings celebrate their lives while they shut me out of every major event. I cried alone in my room, while you all pretended I didn't exist. I'm not being childish, I'm protecting myself. My mom let out a choked sob, covering her mouth with one trembling hand. Chloe, please, we love you. We're your family. Don't push us away. I shook my head, my chest tightening. Love isn't just a word you throw around when it's convenient, Mom. Love is about being there for each other, about making each other feel valued. And that's not what you've given me. I saw my dad's jaw tighten, the muscles in his neck straining as he struggled to keep his composure. You're going to regret this, he said, his voice cold and final. One day you're going to wake up and realize you cut off the only family you have. I met his gaze, my own eyes burning with unshed tears. No, Dad. I'm cutting off the people who made me feel like I was never part of this family in the first place. There's a difference. They left. Without another word, my mom's muffled sobs echoing down the hallway. As my dad guided her back to their car, I closed the door behind them, leaning against it as the weight of the confrontation crashed down on me. Eric found me like that when he got home an hour later. My back against the door, my knees pulled to my chest, silent tears streaming down my face. Hey? He said softly, dropping his bags and crossing the room to kneel in front of me. What happened? I let out a shaky breath, wiping my tears with the back of my hand. My parents were here. They tried to guilt me into inviting my siblings again. Eric's jaw tightened, his eyes darkening. Do you want me to talk to them? I managed a weak smile, my heart swelling with gratitude for this man who had stood by my side through all of this. No, I think I just need to breathe for a minute. He nodded, leaning in to press a gentle kiss to my forehead. Take all the time you need. I'm here. I wrapped my arms around his neck, holding him close as I tried to steady my breathing. In that moment, I realized something important. For the first time in my life, I felt truly supported. I felt seen. And I knew, without a doubt, that I had made the right choice. The weeks leading up to my wedding felt like a strange mix of bliss and chaos. On one hand, I was excited to marry Eric, the one person who had always stood by me even when my own family didn't. On the other hand, my siblings' attempts to guilt-trip me were becoming relentless. It started with a flurry of texts and calls from random family members. My Uncle Peter, who I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly felt the need to weigh in. Uncle Peter. Chloe, this is family we're talking about. You need to let this go. Your siblings are trying to reach out, but you're pushing them away. You're better than this. I didn't bother replying. I knew exactly what had happened. My siblings had rallied the extended family to their side, spinning the narrative to make me look like the villain. They had always been good at that, controlling the story, making themselves out to be the innocent ones, while I became the bitter, unreasonable little sister. Then came the Facebook posts. Olivia, never one to miss an opportunity for a dramatic performance, shared a carefully curated photo collage of our childhood, complete with a teary caption about missing the days when family meant everything. It was so transparently manipulative that I almost laughed. Olivia. I just want my sister back. We may have drifted apart, but family is forever. I showed the post to Eric, who was busy helping me finalize our seating chart. He glanced at my phone, snorted, and shook his head. She's really trying to play the victim here, huh? He said, tapping his pen against the table. Yep, I replied, tossing my phone aside. Classic Olivia. Then a few days later, Ethan decided to go the direct route. I got a text from him late one night, long after I'd given up on the idea of sleeping. Ethan, we need to talk. This whole wedding situation is ridiculous. We're your family, you can't just cut us out like this. I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the screen. For a brief moment, I considered replying, trying to explain again why I had made this decision. But then I remembered all the times I had tried to have real conversations with my siblings only to be brushed off or talked down to. I remembered the countless nights I had spent crying in my room, feeling like I didn't matter to the people who should have cared about me the most. So I did what I should have done a long time ago. I blocked his number. It felt oddly liberating, like cutting a cord that had been strangling me for years. The next morning, my mom called again. I had half a mind to ignore her, but a small, stubborn part of me still hoped that maybe, just maybe, she would finally understand my side. Chloe. She began, her voice already dripping with disappointment. What is going on with you? Your siblings are heartbroken. They've been trying to reach out and you're just ignoring them. This isn't like you. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. Mom, I'm not ignoring them. I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. Protecting yourself. She repeated, her tone incredulous. From your own family. What happened to you, Chloe? You used to be such a sweet, loving girl. Now you're just cold. I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. Maybe I got tired of being the one no one cared about. Maybe I got tired of begging for a place in this family. That's not fair. She snapped, her voice rising. Your siblings love you. They always have. I could feel my patience slipping. If they loved me, they would have included me. They would have invited me to their weddings. They would have made me feel like I mattered, but they didn't. Mom? They made me feel like a burden, like an outsider. And I'm done pretending that's okay. There was a long, heavy silence. I could hear her breathing on the other end, the sound of her wrestling with her own guilt. Chloe, she said finally, her voice quieter. Now almost pleading. Family is forever. You're going to regret this. One day, you'll see. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar ache of disappointment settle into my bones. Maybe I will, Mom, but I'd rather live with that regret than keep letting myself be hurt by people who never really cared about me. I hung up before she could say anything else. My hands shaking as I set my phone down on the kitchen counter. Eric found me there a few minutes later, leaning against the counter with my head in my hands. He crossed the room in 2 quick steps, wrapping his arms around me from behind and pressing a gentle kiss to the side of my head. You okay? He murmured, his voice warm and steady, the perfect anchor in the middle of my emotional storm. I leaned back into his embrace, closing my eyes as I took a deep, steadying breath. I don't know. I admitted, my voice barely more than a whisper. I didn't think it would be this hard. He tightened his grip around me, resting his chin on my shoulder. I know. But you're doing the right thing. You deserve to be surrounded by people who actually care about you, and that's exactly what we're going to do. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, a mix of relief and exhaustion flooding my system. Thank you, I whispered, reaching up to squeeze his hand, for always being on my side. Always, he replied without hesitation, his lips brushing against my ear. You're my family now. In that moment, I realized that I had already found the kind of family I had always longed for. One that made me feel seen, valued, and loved. And for the first time, I truly believed that was enough. The morning of my wedding arrived with a strange calm. I woke up to the soft light filtering through the bedroom curtains, the sound of birds chirping outside, and the quiet hum of my own heartbeat, steady but strong. I took a deep breath, letting the reality of the day settle into my bones. I was getting married. My best friend Lily, who had flown in from across the country to be my maid of honor, was already up bustling around the living room in her mismatched pajamas, humming to herself as she arranged the breakfast spread. She shot me a wide grin as I shuffled into the kitchen, still wrapped in my robe. Morning, bride-to-be, she chirped, sliding a cup of coffee across the counter, ready to become Mrs. Anderson. I felt a flutter of nerves, but it was the good kind. The kind that reminded me I was about to marry the man who had stood by my side through all the chaos my family had thrown my way. More than ready, I replied, taking a grateful sip of the steaming coffee. Thanks for being here, Lil. She rolled her eyes, tossing a piece of toast onto my plate. Please, like I'd missed this for the world. As I sat down at the kitchen table, I felt my phone buzz against my robe pocket. For a moment, my heart seized, the old fear creeping back. I half expected another guilt-ridden message from my mom, or a snarky text from Olivia. But when I pulled the phone out, I saw Eric's name on the screen. Eric. Morning, beautiful. Can't wait to see you at the end of the aisle. I love you more than you'll ever know. I felt my eyes well up, a soft smile stretching across my lips. Eric, Lily asked, glancing up from her frantic search for the butter knife she had just misplaced. Yeah, I whispered, staring down at the words on my screen. He's amazing. Lily paused, her eyes softening as she leaned against the counter, toast forgotten. You deserve this, you know. All of it. The love, the happiness, you deserve it. I swallowed the lump in my throat, nodding as I blinked back, the tears threatening to spill over. I know I whispered more to myself than to her. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of hairspray, makeup brushes, and nervous giggles. The small bridal suite at the venue felt like a whirlwind of silk and lace, the air buzzing with the energy of a dozen excited voices. As my hairdresser pinned the final twist of my updo into place, I caught my reflection in the mirror and froze. For the first time in my life, I felt beautiful. Not just pretty, not just presentable, but truly beautiful. It was as if all the years of feeling like the forgotten little sister had been stripped away, leaving me free to shine in my own right. Lily appeared behind me in the mirror, her eyes already misty as she adjusted my veil. You look like a princess, she whispered, her voice catching on the last word. I let out a shaky breath, my eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Thank you, I whispered back, reaching up to squeeze her hand. The ceremony itself was perfect. The garden we had chosen was bathed in soft sunlight, the air filled with the scent of blooming roses and the gentle rustle of leaves. Twinkling lights hung from the trees, casting a warm golden glow over the small crowd of our closest friends and family. I clutched my bouquet a little tighter as I stepped onto the stone path leading to the gazebo where Eric waited. His eyes locked on mine, his smile wide and unguarded. I felt my heart swell as I took those first few steps, my feet light as air, my heart full of a happiness I hadn't thought I would ever feel. As I reached the gazebo, Eric took my hand, his fingers warm and steady against my own. I felt a tear slip down my cheek as he whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "You look incredible." I felt the last pieces of my broken heart snap back into place. This was it. This was the family I had always wanted, the one I had chosen for myself. The vows were a blur of whispered promises and shared smiles, my heart swelling with every word Eric spoke. By the time we said "I do," there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. Even Eric's usually stoic father had to discreetly wipe his eyes with his sleeve. The reception that followed was a whirlwind of laughter, dancing, and clinking glasses. I felt myself relax into the moment, letting go of the last remnants of doubt and guilt that had clung to me like shadows. At one point, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the garden lights cast a warm golden glow over the guests, I snuck away from the crowd, needing a moment to breathe. I wandered to the edge of the garden, the cool evening air brushing against my bare shoulders as I looked out over the rolling hills in the distance. I felt a presence behind me, and a moment later, Eric slipped his arms around my waist, pulling me back against his chest. "Hey," he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. "Why are you hiding out here?" I let out a soft, contented sigh, leaning back against him as I looked up at the twinkling lights above us. Just taking it all in. It's perfect. He tightened his grip around me, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You deserve perfect, Chloe. You deserve all of this." I felt my throat tighten, a fresh wave of tears threatening to spill over. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Thank you for choosing me." He pressed a gentle kiss to the side of my neck, his lips warm against my skin. "Always?" he whispered, his voice steady and certain. "I will always choose you." As I stood there in his arms, the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses echoing behind us, I realized that I had finally found the family I had always wanted. A family that saw me, valued me, and loved me without conditions. And for the first time, I felt truly, completely free. Story 2. I was tricked by my parents into paying for an extravagant family vacation to which I was never invited. I grinned as a result, keep silent, and my subsequent actions. Everything was altered. I'm a 25-year-old man who, up until last year, believed I was doing rather well for myself. I had a small but cozy apartment, a respectable IT career, and I was managing my life on my own without any help. However, my parents were able to reintegrate me into their chaotic world in some way, all thanks to Mike, my older brother. Here's where I set the scene. Mike is still living at home at the age of 27. Since he was 17, he has been figuring things out. High school. He barely made it out of college. He has experienced 3. He was expelled from the first one for failing almost all of the classes, save gym. Due to disciplinary concerns, the second fired him. He claims that his innovative approach to deadlines was misunderstood by the teachers. Come on, though. Everyone knows that's a symptom of excessive partying and assignment neglect. I can't even recall his justification or the arrangement with the third one. Work, they're a joke. I see Mike's employment history is essentially one of job changes. He was found giving his pals discounts when he was employed at an electronics store. After that, he attempted working as a barista, but gave up because the patrons were too picky. He most recently worked for 2 weeks at a gym before claiming that early shifts were detrimental to his way of life. And me in the meanwhile. In order to graduate debt-free, I worked really hard throughout college, balancing part-time jobs and scholarships. I've managed to start saving money, have a reliable work, and pay my own expenses. However, it seems that being the responsible one does not translate into a pat on the back in my family. It indicates that they will contact you in the event of a necessity. My parents invited me to join them for Sunday supper last year. Not a huge deal. They frequently do it. While drinking his iced tea, My dad likes to question me about my future ambitions while my mom creates this delicious lasagna. It's what they do. However, I could sense that something was different this time. Midway through our meal, Mom slaps me with Lucas. We've been thinking, honey. Wouldn't it be pleasant if you spent some time at home? On my garlic toast, I nearly choked. What? Why would I do that? In her most calming voice, she responded, well, it just makes sense. Rent is a waste of money and housing costs are out of control. You could save a lot of money for the future if you went back in time. Like he was privy to some brilliant scheme. Dad nodded. That's right. You're still young, Lucas. Now is the moment to manage your finances wisely. You would also be supporting the family. The guilt trip was there. My parents are experts in this field. Since I can remember, they have been using the Family Helps Family card. When Mike was a teenager, he crashed his father's car. Family supports. Family. Lucas. When Mike needed money for books, I discovered that he was using it to buy a gaming console. Lucas. Nevertheless, they presented it as very rational. Mom added that it could only be for a short time. Furthermore, it's not as though you wouldn't be making a modest contribution to cover groceries and rent, much less than what you pay for your apartment. I didn't immediately say yes. I mean, I enjoyed living in my apartment. Yes, it was small, but it belonged to me. I'm not being pestered about the dishes in the sink. No arbitrary family drama, and definitely no Mike bumming around in his pajama pants at 2 in the afternoon. But I also couldn't deny they had a point. Rent was eating up a big chunk of my paycheck, and moving back home could give me a chance to save up. Just think about it, Mom said, flashing that hopeful smile she always uses when she wants me to agree to something. No rush. I spent the next few days mulling it over. On paper, it made sense I could save money. Maybe even enough for a down payment on a house someday. And yeah, part of me thought it might be a chance to reconnect with my family. Things had been a little distant between us since I moved out, and maybe this could fix that, so after a lot of back and forth in my head, I called Mom and said I'd do it. She sounded thrilled. Oh, Lucas, you won't regret this. It'll be so nice to have the family together again. Looking back, that should have been my first red flag. She sounded way too excited about what was supposed to be me helping out the family, but at the time I didn't think much of it. I figured they were just happy to have me around again. I moved back in the next weekend. They gave me my old room, which hadn't changed much since high school. Same twin bed, same posters on the wall. It was a little weird, but I told myself it was temporary. For the first few weeks, everything appeared okay. I paid a little rent payment, considerably less than what I'd been paying for my apartment, and helped out with food. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad either. I assured myself I'd made the correct decision. Mom would gush about how lovely it was to have me back, and Dad kept repeating things like it's good for the family to keep together. Even Mike was unusually friendly at first, making jokes and really cleaning up after himself once or twice, but in hindsight, I should have known better. My folks are professionals at making everything appear good on the surface while quietly manipulating the strings behind the scenes. And Mike, well, Mike's simply Mike. He's been riding the family gravy train for years. And I should have recognized that. My homecoming was simply another stop on his continuous voyage. At the time, though, I was optimistic. I thought this may possibly work. I felt I was helping my family while benefiting myself. But as you probably expected, it didn't take long for things to start feeling weird. It started modest little things here and there. For example, Mike's room suddenly got a substantial improvement. One day, as I passed his door, I noticed him mounting a large flat-screen TV on his wall. A brand new gaming PC with one of those goofy light-up seats was on his desk. He simply shrugged when I asked him where he obtained the money for all of it. Without barely glancing up, he replied, "I've been saving." "What are you saving from?" I wanted to inquire, but I decided not to. He may have saved money. There have been more bizarre incidents. Then there was the refrigerator issue. My groceries always seemed to vanish within 48 hours after my purchase. I would stock up on staples like bread, milk, eggs, and a few snacks. And the next day, I would discover Mike devouring a sandwich the size of my head, and half the bread had been consumed. "Have you consumed all of the eggs?" One morning I asked him. "Yes," he responded idly, browsing through his phone. "I prepared an omelet. Or do you want me to pick up more?" I was dumbfounded when I looked at him. The person was behaving as like my question was a small annoyance, even though he hadn't bought food in years. When I subsequently informed my mother about it, she only chuckled. "He doesn't consider those things, Mike. You know, I will remind him." The deliveries followed. Mike seems to receive a delivery every other day. Clothes, shoes, and various devices, clearly unnecessary items. He once received a huge package from a delivery man that was a brand new sound system. He was almost ecstatic as he set it up. Where is the source of all this money? Trying not to come across as very accusing, I asked. Oh, he answered hazily, here and there. This presumably referred to my wallet, since when I went grocery shopping the following time, my mother gave me her card and told me to use it for family expenses and to cover any leftover money. We'll reimburse you later. At first, I didn't give it much thought. It was one of those I thought deals like we'll square it up later never materialized. I had already spent hundreds of dollars on groceries before I learned she wasn't keeping count. Then there was the issue of rent. We had decided on a modest monthly payment when I initially returned. I hate to ask, but could you help a little more this month? Mom asked Lucas after 2 months. Right now, things are tight. Sure, I said, assuming it would only happen once. However, it wasn't. When I mentioned it to my dad, the small extra became the new normal, and all of a sudden I was spending almost as much as I had for my apartment. It's only a temporary situation. Right now, you're in a better financial situation than we are, which benefits the family. The term good for the family was becoming monotonous, but it was more than simply the cash. It was the entire atmosphere. I became aware of how Mike was at the center of everything. If he needed to borrow the automobile, my parents went out of their way to fetch him everything he desired. No issue. Mom prepared snacks and instructed me to be accommodating with the noise level if he wanted to have friends over for a movie night. In the meantime, I received a passive-aggressive remark about how everyone had to help if I even left a plate in the sink. I once heard Mom boasting to her sister over the phone about Mike's finally getting his act together. She talked endlessly about his intentions to launch a company. Some hazy notion of making personalized shoes or something. As if my accomplishments were a footnote in the larger scheme of Mike's life, she remarked, Lucas is helping us keep things stable. That was it, furious. I went upstairs, closed my door, and sat on my bed. How could I have allowed this to happen? Mike got to float through life like it was one huge vacation while I was working nonstop, paying for everything and putting up with this bullshit. I began mentally reliving everything: Mike's new TV, the disappearance of food, the many deliveries, and the endless rent increases. Everything began to make sense. This has nothing to do with aiding the family, with Mike as the main character and me as the supporting one. This was about me supporting their way of life, preserving the lights. I made an effort to discuss it with my parents the next day. Look, I feel like I'm contributing a lot more than we originally agreed upon, I replied as I set them down. Is it possible for us to revisit our first discussion? Mom smiled at me like she always does. We really appreciate what you're doing, Lucas, simply said. Things are a little difficult at the moment, Dad said. You know how it is. It won't last forever, only until we are able to stand again. They had a justification for everything. Always, additionally, each time they brought it up, they painted me as the villain. I began to pay more attention to the way things were being handled. After that conversation, I became aware of how frequently, when they believed I wasn't listening, Mom and Dad would whisper to one another. I noticed that Mike seemed to be constantly taking on new projects that needed funding from my parents, and I came to the conclusion that this was not going to stop. They had no intention of getting back on their feet. As long as I allowed it, they intended to continue to rely on me. However, I refused to let them. No more. One Friday night was the last straw. After another long, demanding work week, it was meant to be my time to relax. I was hoping for a peaceful evening where I could get some takeaway watch, something pointless, and rest. Of course. However, with my family, nothing is ever straightforward. The house was in disarray when I arrived. It looked like a frat party in the living room. The aftermath. Chip bags and empty Coke cans littered the area, and Mike's hyperactive dog Max was howling wildly at an unidentified sound outside. Mike's feet were up on the coffee table as he lay splayed out on the couch, playing games as normal. I said, hey, and left my suitcase at the door. Can you also tidy this up? This place is filthy. He hardly gave me a look. Yes, I will address it later. His eyes were fixed on the TV screen as he muttered, No later. Louder this time, I said, Right now? The last thing I want to do after spending the entire day at work is return home to this mess. Oh man, relax. He paused his game and stated that only a handful of cans. Why do you always act so stiff? I sensed my patient becoming tense. Mike, this goes beyond a few cans. You can't even clean up after yourself, and every single day I'm working my ass off while you sit around doing nothing. What's wrong with you? He sprang to his feet and fired back. She returned home. Not me. You weren't invited to be a housemaid. By now we were shouting, and Max, obviously annoyed by the commotion, began to bark even louder. Are you serious now? I yelled. Additionally, I've been handling my bills, purchasing groceries, and paying my rent. And you believe I'm only playing the role of maid? You've been taking advantage of your parents for years, and now you're attempting to blame me. Mike waved me away while rolling his eyes. Oh, we're at it once more, Lucas. Always so responsible, poor guy. Dude, you're not a saint. Leave if you don't like it. You are not being forced to stay. I wasn't prepared for how hard that hit. What do you know? Shaking my head, I said, You're correct, I'm done, and don't have to remain. He briefly displayed astonishment, but he soon covered it up with a smile. Excellent. Avoid being struck by the door as you leave. I slammed my door behind me and rushed upstairs. This time, I wasn't going to back down. After grabbing my duffel bag, I began packing. Whether it was inconvenient or late didn't matter to me. I finished packing my luggage with clothing and necessities. I kept reliving the fight over and over in my mind. How could I have allowed things to reach this stage? What had kept me there for so long? The answers were no longer important. I had a gut feeling that I wouldn't be staying here much longer. I was about to depart when I heard the front door open as I made my way downstairs with my duffel bag. After supper, Mom and Dad returned. What are you doing? Lucas? When Mom saw my backpack, her once jolly tone turned to one of perplexity. I'm going flatly, I replied. What? She moved closer and asked, why? What took place? Mike entered the room before I could reply, his prior smug look remaining on his face. He leaned against the wall and whispered, He's just being dramatic. Mom's expression became intense. What did you do, Mike, nothing defensively, he said. He is exaggerating our small argument to an absurd degree. I couldn't contain my resentful laughter. We had a little dispute, and you told me that if I didn't like it, I should just leave because no one asked me to remain? I am now departing. Mom's voice fell to that quiet, solemn tone she employs when she's attempting to maintain composure as she turned to Mike. You must apologize to your brother, Mike. For what purpose? She sternly reprimanded him for making him feel uncomfortable. Lucas is needed here. It is unfair to drive him away like this when he has been providing a lot of assistance, Dad added, who had remained silent until now. She is correct. It will be much more difficult for all of us if Lucas goes. Mike, you have to put this right. Mike let out a grunt. Right, I'm sorry. In any case, I was incredulous as I stood there looking at them. They didn't ask him to apologize because they wanted me to feel valued or because they cared about me. They wanted me to stay so they could continue to exploit me, which is why they were asking. It came down to this after all those months of believing I was supporting my family and hoped we could be getting back in touch. I was only their ticket to eat. Do not bother? Slinging my backpack over my shoulder, I spoke. I'm not staying either. And I won't be persuaded by a phony apology. Hold on. Lucas. Mom said as she moved ahead of me. We can resolve this. Just sit down and have a conversation. No, I answered firmly. I'm finished, I'm done. Mom's expression dimmed and she briefly appeared to be truly distressed. You're being unreasonable, she said after straightening up. Lucas, we're a family. Exactly, I said. Families support one another. However, that is not the situation at hand. I'm done complying with this one-sided situation. I opened the door after passing her. Whatever it was, I heard Mike mutter as I went outside. He will return. I didn't even try to answer. I simply tossed my bag in the back seat, went outside to my car, and drove away. I crashed at my buddy Jake's house that evening. He made no inquiries at all. Stay as long as you need, he added, giving me a blanket. I felt lighter than I have in months as I lay on his couch. For the first time in a long, long time, the expectations of my family were not weighing heavily on me. They blew up my phone the next day as I had anticipated. I didn't care, though I was at last beginning to feel normal again. A few months after I moved out, I ultimately found my own apartment. But living at my friend Jake's house had been a lifesaver. A tiny yet comfortable place without all the responsibilities of living with my family. Life was quiet, and I was becoming used to my routine. Then one day my mother called. To be honest, I wasn't in the mood for one of her guilt trips, so I didn't pick up right away. However, I later listened to the voicemail she left. "Hello, Lucas, this is Mom. All I wanted to do was chat. We truly miss having you around and have been thinking about you. Although we acknowledge that things became tense, we would like to make amends. When you can give me a call back. I adore you." That ultimately adore you. It seems so rushed. My skin crawled. I thought I should at least listen to her, though I gave her a call back because I thought it would be an olive branch. On the first ring, she responded. Her voice was smooth and syrupy. "I'm so happy you phoned Lucas. How are you?" "Okay," I responded warily. "What is going on?" As she was speaking, she began to call attention to the fact that we didn't treat you fairly while you were residing here, and we are very sorry about it. "Not buying it," I responded. "We were considering doing something special as a family, you know, to get back in touch and put things right," she said. "How do you feel about a lavish family getaway?" Now, I could have been thrilled if this had been someone else who doesn't like a good trip. However, I knew better than to believe anything that seemed too wonderful to be true. Because this was my family, I still went along with it. "I'm not sure," I answered. "What sort of trip?" "A vacation in the tropics." Her voice was virtually brimming with excitement as she spoke. "Gorgeous beaches and delicious cuisine. Calm down. It will be flawless. A resort in the Bahamas was on our radar. What are your thoughts?" I paused. It was alluring. That kind of vacation seemed fantastic. I could really use the break, to be honest. However, my parents weren't known for being honest about things, so this was their situation. "All right," I replied warily. "Give it some thought." "Oh, so lovely," she remarked, obviously attempting to conceal her excitement. "Let us know as soon as possible so we can begin preparing. But take your time. This might not have been as benign as it appeared. My family wanted more than a reunion. They had a desire, and I knew pretty well what it was based on the way things had gone in the past. Nevertheless, I thought I would visit their location to hear the entire pitch. It might be amusing at the very least." I drove to the residence a few days later. Everything appeared to be okay when I arrived. Mom was as enthusiastic as ever as she greeted me at the door. There was no sign of Mike, and Dad was comfortably seated in his recliner. They seemed to be attempting to create the ideal family moment. Mom started her sales pitch as soon as we sat down in the living room. She spoke about how much she missed me, the value of family, and how this journey may give us all a new beginning. She also included a few sentences that were loaded with regret, such as, "We just want to make it up to you, Lucas, and family is all we have." Dad added his typical pragmatic perspective. "It's a fantastic chance for us to connect, Lucas. You've been putting in a lot of effort. You deserve some time off." I let them do their thing and remained silent, nodding now and again. However, as the discussion progressed, it became evident that they were making an excessive effort. "Okay, so how's this going to work?" I finally asked. Mom grinned. "We reasoned that having you handle the booking would be the most convenient. You can make a reservation when we provide you with all the information, including dates, preferences, and other specifics, then we'll immediately reimburse you." Immediately after, I raised an eyebrow in question. "Naturally," she replied hastily. "We just believed that having a single person handle all of the coordination would be easier. I heard the garage door open at that very time Mike was here. I had no intention of staying. Indeed, I heard them conversing in the kitchen as I was making my way to the door. Mom said we would pledge to reimburse Lucas when he agreed to book everything, but we won't." Mike added a giggle to his voice. "In any case, he owes us." "Then as usual, he will go on, Dad. He has the funds." I was momentarily astonished but not totally taken aback. Reconnecting was not the point of this. As usual, it was simply another plot to take advantage of me. I started preparing my next step and went without saying goodbye. I would definitely offer them a vacation if they asked me to arrange one. But it wouldn't be the one they had in mind. I was going to reverse the situation this time. Almost instantly, the strategy began to take shape. Although I would agree to arrange the vacation, things weren't going to work out as planned. Let's just say that they were about to discover the consequences of underestimating the man who has been listening the entire time I contacted my mother when I came home and said, "Okay, I'll do it. I'll take care of the reservation if you send me everyone's preferences." She said, "Oh, Lucas, thank you so much. We had faith that you would change. This is going to be really amazing." Okay. So here's the problem. My parents believed they had already won when I consented to arrange the vacation. However, I refused to allow that to occur. Not now. I would give them a prank they would never forget if they tried to fool me. The first priority was to maintain order and normalcy. I had to keep them from thinking I was spying on them. I thus cooperated when my mother began texting me about preferences, dates, and room kinds. Yes, Mom sounds wonderful. I'll take care of it. She even gave me many calls to make sure I was still comfortable making upfront payments. However, I maintained my composure. Yes, no issue. I'll take care of it. I'm sure she felt I was the ideal sucker. Instead of planning a trip for 4 as they had anticipated, I started working as soon as I acquired all of their information, including dates, travel schedules, and preferred rooms. I made a reservation for 1. Me in the Bahamas. I discovered an all-inclusive luxury resort with room service, a private villa, and views of the ocean. The fictitious journey works. I created some quite compelling objections using my technological expertise. For their hotel stays, I developed fictitious schedules, making sure everything appeared authentic to make it appear even more special. I also included a few extras like a free breakfast and check-in for a very important individual. This is where things improve, though. I used a travel agency that I knew only permitted modifications to be made by the principal account holder when I booked their flights. In this manner, I could simply click to cancel the flights if or when they discovered the technique. Naturally. I also handed them fictitious tickets with the incorrect departure time printed on them. Lucas, I understand what you're thinking now. Just to play with your family. This is a lot of work. Shit. You'd be correct too. There was a lot. However, I believed they deserved it after what they had done to me. In addition, I felt good about myself because I was finally advocating for myself. Well worth the effort. When the vacation day finally arrived, I made sure to maintain my composure. That morning, I gave my mother a call to double-check the information. I informed her that your flight departs at 11 a.m. Don't forget to bring the printouts. I supplied you and arrive early for security when it comes to digital tickets. Certain airlines are particular. She exclaimed, her voice brimming with appreciation. Oh, thank you, Lucas. We can't wait. There will never be a better journey than this one. Through the phone, I could just hear her grinning. In the meanwhile, I had already packed and prepared to go. I made sure to be to the airport well in advance of their arrival because I had a flight on a different carrier that was scheduled to depart 2 hours earlier. I managed to see Mom's friend by keeping my phone on. We're en route, a text message appears. I replied with a swift, secure journey. Before switching to airplane mode and boarding my trip, I can't wait to meet you at the resort. The resort exceeded my expectations in every way. Upon arriving at my hotel, I snapped a photo of the vista from my balcony and emailed it to them, along with a message. I hope your journey is going well. The vista was nearly as pleasant as the joy of knowing they had no idea what was coming. Nearly. I knew that until they arrived at the airport, they wouldn't notice anything was off. The departure time on their fictitious tickets was 2 hours later than the actual flight schedule. The plane would be in the air by the time they arrived at the gate. I saw the scenario: Mike standing off to the side, most likely looking on his phone, totally unaware of the drama, Mom frantically waving the phony tickets at the airline employees, and Dad complaining that this is why we don't let Lucas handle things. The finest thing, however, wasn't that. The nicest thing was that they would phone me as soon as they learned the airplane had departed without them. And I'd be prepared when they did. My phone did indeed vibrate an hour or so after their scheduled departure time. Mom was the one I let it to ring. Then Dad called. I also let that one ring. At last, Mike texted, "WTF, dude. The flight is no longer available." I didn't respond for a few minutes. "What are you saying?" "Here I am at the resort. Did you not board the aircraft?" It was practically instantaneous. "Our tickets aren't functioning. The flight has already departed," they claimed. I typed back with a smile. "That's strange. Everything about my flight went smoothly. When I have Wi-Fi, I'll check on it." Prior to resetting my phone to airplane mode, I sent the group chat one final message. The text reads, "Enjoy your vacation," and it shows me relaxing by the pool with a drink in hand and sunglasses on. Hold on a minute. This time, I suppose it's just me. Let's toast. I then switched off my phone. The days that followed were wonderful. It was made even better by the fact that I swam 8 amazing meals and relaxed in the sun without receiving any guilt trips or passive-aggressive remarks from those who were stranded at home trying to find out what went wrong. My last day here is today. Though I know the real pleasure is waiting for me back home, I feel totally rejuvenated. When I come home, I'll give you an update. Chapter 8. Okay, so allow me to share with you what transpired when I returned from my luxurious trip alone. Even while I was aware that the consequences would be tremendous, I didn't anticipate how absurd my family's response would be if you had previously believed that they were manipulating. Simply wait. After the most restful week of my life, I took a plane home. For once, I felt like I was treating myself the way I deserved and the resort was ideal. However, I noticed them as soon as I arrived at my flat. Yes, Mike and my folks were encamped outside my door as if they were planning an intervention. Mom was enraged. Mike only looked irritated and Dad was pacing and red-faced. Most likely because this required him to leave his PlayStation. Mom threw herself into the elevator as soon as I got out, Lucas. How could you have done this to us? She almost let out a cry. Like fools, we were standing at the airport. We were unable to use the tickets you provided. Dad added, accusing me with a finger point. You made us seem foolish in front of everyone? According to the airline employees, the tickets weren't authentic. Are you aware of how that made us appear? I responded. Oh, I know exactly how it made you look. As I gently opened my door. I knew they wouldn't leave until they finished their tirade, so I left the door open and went inside. Mike came in last saying to himself, "That's so stupid." I agreed with him. For once, I gestured toward the couch and said, "Sit down." They didn't. Mom chose to stand in the center of the living room with her arms crossed. Instead, anger and fury were mixed together on her face. Lucas, why would you do this? Her tone changed to that of a disgruntled parent as she questioned. As a family, we just wanted to spend time with you. I couldn't contain my laughter. Family? Really? Are you referring to the same family who planned to utilize me to cover the entire cost of the trip? The same family who had no intention of repaying me. Remember how I heard you in the kitchen? Don't pretend that this was about getting back in touch. There was utter quiet for a moment as their faces became pale. Then, being the defensive one, Dad said it was only a miscommunication. That's not how we meant it. Oh, really? Taking out my phone, I said. After tapping the screen many times, I pushed play. And the recording of their chat in the kitchen filled the room. I put my phone on hold and put it back in my pocket. There is still a miscommunication, I questioned, staring at my father like a fish struggling to breathe. Mom opened her mouth, shut it, and then opened it again. At last, she stated that the statement was misconstrued. This time I laughed more, taken out of context. You really stated that you would not reimburse me. How much more clarity is required? At last, Mike, who had been unusually silent, piped out. All okay. All right, it's not like you can't afford it, but perhaps we were going to let you pay for it. You're doing all right? With my fury boiling, I turned to face him. Chantal, I apologize, Mike. Do I have to pay for your vacations right now? Or is that just true when your parents run out of money and try to save you from whatever mess you've caused this time before? Don't? Mom said, don't talk to your brother like that? Working diligently. I broke off, raising my voice. At what time? Even though he hasn't had an actual job for years, he constantly has new devices and vacations scheduled. I'm the one busting my ass in the meantime, and you want me to simply give you my money as if it were nothing. No more. Dad attempted to intervene in a more subdued but still patronizing tone. We're family. Lucas, you shouldn't be revealing our private matters in this manner. The final straw was that, do you wish to discuss family? I spoke in a firm yet piercing tone. Family members don't control one another. A family does not treat one child like a cash machine while allowing the other to get away with it. Just because you're angry doesn't mean you can suddenly play the family card. This time I refused to be used by you. After that, they had little to say. Mom said, "You've changed, Lucas," in an attempt to guilt me one final time. You've changed from who you were before. Yes, I have evolved until I learn how to advocate for myself. I said, "You're upset because you can't keep me under control anymore." I then motioned for them to go and open the door. As Dad remarked, "We're not done talking about this," and left. Yes, I believe we are. As I closed the door behind them, I answered. The actual repercussions started the next day. My phone began to overflow with texts from common friends and extended relatives, many of which included some variation of taco. You are so self-centered that you treat your parents that way. It seems that Mom and Dad quickly propagated their version of events. They claim that I played a cruel hoax on them by giving them phony tickets, omitting the fact that they were actually going to defraud me. I'm considering retaliating against them now. I have a plan. When Update 2 is finished, I'll let you folks know. Reddit. Hello once more. The long-awaited update is now here. I made the decision to come clean after my family's mayhem. No more deceit. No more secrets. I reasoned that I should be allowed to share my side of the tale with everyone who would listen since my parents were going to share theirs. I needed to correct the record. I took the course of action that any rational person in this day and age would take. I posted it on Facebook. I covered everything in a lengthy, in-depth piece. I began by explaining how my parents gradually transferred all of the financial responsibilities on me after persuading me to return home under the pretense of supporting the family. I explained how they had been taking advantage of me to support my way of life while making me feel as though I wasn't doing enough. I didn't hold back. I explained that I overheard them discussing how they intended to defraud me of the money I paid for the vacation and that they had no intention of repaying me. Naturally, I also added the portion about my retaliation that everyone was most interested in. Here's where I made the point though. I've included the recording in which Mike and my parents laughed as they laid out their whole plan. I made sure to include a disclaimer at the beginning of the post. I'm not trying to make anyone look bad since my parents have been presenting their version of events. I feel it is only right that my friends and family know the reality. Who is at fault is up to you to determine. I waited to see what would happen after hitting post. The response came instantly. The post received dozens of comments and shares in just 1 hour. I was unaware that this was the complete story, and those who had first purchased my parents' sob story quickly started to backtrack. "I'm so sorry for judging you, Lucas," one cousin wrote. "You were correct to defend yourself." "Wow, I always thought your parents favored Mike, but I didn't realize it was this bad," said a family acquaintance who had known us since we were children. "Well done for leaving that terrible environment." I received a note from one of Mom's best friends who said, "I'm shocked that they did this to you. I'm so sorry I trusted them without hearing your side first. You didn't deserve any of that. As for my parents..." Oh, they were outraged. Mom left a series of comments on the post. All versions of, "I can't believe you're broadcasting our private family affairs online. You're making us seem bad." Dad's answer was more frightening. He wrote, "You better take this down, Lucas. You'll regret it because you're going too far." Neither of them received a response from me. I changed the post instead, adding a brief update at the end. I stand by everything I've stated here in case you were wondering. No matter how many threats or guilt trips I get, I will not be removing this post. Mike sent me a private message saying, "Wow, dude, really?" But predictably, he mentioned nothing on the post itself. "Do you think this is acceptable?" I also didn't bother to respond to him. As the aftermath persisted over the following several days, additional family members and friends got in touch, some of them giving assistance. Some are attempting to mediate. Some said that in order to prevent more strife, I should be the mature one and remove the post. However, I had little interest in dispute resolution at that time. Finally, being free from their influence was something I was interested in. When my parents returned to my flat, it was the tipping point. Mom pleaded with me to clean up this mess, but I stood at the doorway and refused to allow them in this time. "You've wrecked our reputation," she cried, tears flowing down her cheeks. "Lucas, how could you have done this to us? We are your parents," I told her. "You destroyed your own reputation." I simply said the truth. Perhaps instead of criticizing me, you should examine your own behavior closely. If that makes you feel embarrassed. I shut the door after saying that I posted one last thing on Facebook. Later that day, I would want to express my gratitude to everyone who offered encouragement and good thoughts. For those who believe I overreached myself, I appreciate your viewpoint, but I stand by my choice to tell my family the truth. I'm finished. I have attempted to assist you. I've made an effort to establish limits. I've also made an effort to be the bigger person. You don't value me or my contributions, which is why nothing has worked. From now on, I'm putting my health first. Don't contact, text, or visit my flat. Please, I'm continuing on with my life, and you're not included in that. I then blocked their numbers after they saw my post. I made my Facebook profile private and unfriended them. Now that things are calmer, I've been concentrating on forming bonds with people who genuinely value and care about me. For me, severing ties wasn't the best course of action, it was the sole choice. Sometimes the most self-loving thing you can do is to walk away. I appreciate your patience during this crazy journey. It feels amazing to be free at last.